Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being here tonight. So we need to call this meeting to order and to take a roll call. Rick Safinsky is present. Mr. Mann?
Present.
And then Charles Kennedy is here as acting city attorney for purposes of this hearing. I believe that, I apologize, Courtney, I didn't bring a copy of the agenda, so what are we doing next? Just reading the
Public comment.
Do I read these first?
Yes, you read those first and then we'll do verbal.
All right. So 3 comments were submitted that we will be reading because we don't have 65 this week. This from Lori Reed. Dear Ethics Review Board, this hearing was entirely unnecessary. The complainant's allegations were not the type of conduct the ordinance intended to address. I understand that the rationale to have a hearing was because there were 3 complaints made, not based on the underlying substance of the complaints. If that is the standard, then we are certainly encouraging a piling on to force trivial matters to a hearing. That does not serve anyone, least of all the residents, taxpayers whose resources are being used to litigate personal grievances. The board's procedural rules permit a summary opinion without a hearing. That should have happened here. While I agree with your conclusion, it should never come to this. At the hearing, Mr. Pasinski stated that the board did not intend to hear character witness or testimony. Indeed, that was all we heard. The complainants were allowed to rant in the case of one attack. I certainly hope you will call out tactless and unbecoming behavior no matter who the actor is. Should there be future hearings, I would expect the board to demand decorum from all participants. This board was never intended to be the moral authority for Grosse Pointe Park officials. If there is no violation, then the board should refrain from making moral judgments. Regarding the procedural defect, as a lawyer, I operate within the rules, otherwise, why have them? Finally, while you did not analyze the First Amendment argument, I'm certain you know the correct answer to that. The next is by John Secco of Allegra Development, City of Grosse Pointe Park Council. As a former resident of Grosse Pointe Park for over 26 years and as a real estate professional for over 30 years, I find the public comments made by Councilman Reland to run contrary to the financial interests of the residents of Grosse Pointe Park. As an active real estate professional, I'm constantly looking at investment opportunities all over the United States and the world. The public comments by Councilman Reland publicly ridiculing Sherry Cotton, who is one of Grosse Pointe Park's most generous benefactors and largest taxpayers, as well as other prominent GPP investors, would scare off any real estate investor from making an investment in GPP. By lowering demand for real estate, Councilman Reland has effectively lowered property values for all GPP residents and subsequently property tax revenue. Given this type of behavior from Councilman Reland as well as from some former council members, it is no wonder property values in Grosse Pointe Park are lower than in the adjacent Grosse Pointe community. This is a direct violation of Councilman Reland's fiduciary duty to the residents of GPP, and as such should be cause for the city council to enact any and all sanctions and or penalties available to Councilman Reland to ensure this type of improper behavior does not ever happen again. And the last written submission is from Betty Fortuna, Elizabeth Fortuna. Dear Ethics Committee members, thank you for coming out twice for a public hearing during the pandemic and acting with fairness in regard to the complaints against Vikas Reland. I was impressed with the way you handled the hearing and mostly agree with the outcome. I do disagree with one thing, though. You stated the complainants are all esteemed members of the community. On display during the hearing was an example of Mr. Fickney's bullying behavior. He derogatorily called Vikas a minion, badgering a resident during proceedings, and then said resident, and when said resident wouldn't answer his questions, he called him a piece of shit. This is nothing new from Mr. Fickney and his allies. This is but a small sample of the bullying some of us have endured over the past year by allies of the new council. No one should be surprised when we start to push back. So there's the 3 submitted comments.
Am I the only one?
I don't know, but you could be first.
I'll be first.
Hello, my name is Anna Signorino. Grosse Point Park.
Hold on.
I read your 8-page complaint, I'm sorry, your draft, read that, and I noticed that it's radically different than the 1 page that you submitted for my complaint. Okay, and I was also noticed that on the 3rd paragraph, you said, these complaints are important ones. And I don't know who said that they're important ones. Are you telling me that they're important, or are you saying that because you think that they're important? Because I don't think they're important. When it comes to a Facebook comment, I don't think that warrants this procedure. So I'm asking us to think about, why do some people get to stand up here and have this circus act, and some people don't? Because I didn't get that. I didn't get to share my complaints with the public like Sherry Cotton did, even though mine was the first brought before this committee. Members of this ethic board allowed Sherry Cotton, Ray Patera, and Mike Fickney to have their
No,
voices heard.
I'm sorry, hold on. I
Fantastic,
should
good job.
have commented and asked everyone to make sure that your phones are off, since I observed that in the brief. My apologies. All right. I'm sorry to throw you off.
Thank you. These folks were heard Monday night and broadcast live on Facebook to say how awesome they were and how bad Raylan is. It was nothing but a circus act, like the beginning of a joke. A billionaire, her attorney, and a couple of her buddies walk into a courthouse, right? But that's not a joke. This proceeding should not be a joke. Everyone knew the complaints would be dismissed. It had already been decided on October 7th, 3 weeks before the complaints were even submitted. It's on page 7 here, if you can find the answer. Same one as mine, right? I did 1 page. That's the answer, okay? Sherry Cotton gets 7 pages, 8 pages. For those of you guys who don't know, in September, I say that City Manager Nick Seisland abused the power of his office by suspending my park pass out of retaliation and spite. He and others didn't want me at the grand opening of the dog park talking about the shoddy job and unsafe conditions. I also claimed he abused taxpayer resources by sending 3 armed officers to hand deliver a letter and tell me that they will arrest me for trespassing if I don't comply. I wanted from this committee to direct the city council to have my park pass reinstated, a policy that gives guidance regarding under what circumstances and for how long a pass can be suspended, and 3, for a way for residents to appeal his decision. I never got to call any witnesses. I never got to submit any of my evidence because 2 weeks later, this board didn't grant me a hearing, and you dismissed my complaint. None of my supporting documents were published, but Sherry's are. The only thing people know about my complaint is what they read on that 1-page document, right? Members of the board control the narrative. They get their voice heard, but not mine. I used to have a voice. I spent a year begging city council to not build the dog park in Patterson. I commented during city council meetings. I sent letters. I delivered flyers. I even got on Facebook. The people there were ferociously cyberbullying me, but since I wasn't going away, they blocked me from Facebook. And the bullies on the other community Facebook page were way worse, and those guys really silenced me because of the horrible things that they said.
Okay, I'm sorry, but your time is up, Mr. Signorino.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, gee, that's too bad. Can I keep talking since I had the first complaint maybe, and there aren't any other
No,
comments?
no, you may not.
No, I may not. Well, the reality is, some people get a voice in our community, right? Some people don't.
Okay,
Some people get bullied, right? Silenced.
and we're done. Thank you.
Nick Seisland silenced me. The city council silenced me.
Are
I
there
didn't get to go to the dog park.
any other folks here who wish to publicly comment? Yes.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cheryl Denman, and I'm from 765 Pemberton. And I respect your decision, and I thank you all very much, each of you, for your time to evaluate this ethics complaint. The 3 ethics complaints. As residents, we are truly blessed and thankful for you, and we're also thankful for the generous support and financial contributions of the Grosse Point Park Foundation, donor families such as the Cottons, and all persons who filed the most recent complaints. The millions of dollars of unrestricted gifts fund our wonderful amenities, like the dog park, without strings attached. The vicious acts of Councilman Rowland using his political office to carry out a vendetta with the crew is unacceptable in our civil society. There are serious concerns here, even after this evening. The decorum and conduct of this councilman and the exposure and liability to the city of Grosse Pointe Park cannot be ignored. These issues go to the heart of good and ethical government. More than a half dozen ethical complaints have been filed now against this councilman. This person is unculpable, is more emboldened and more aggressive toward each constituent every new day. If you do not agree with Mr. Rowland, there are different rules for Mr. Rowland. He has been counseled, mentored, and admonished for more than 2 consecutive years while in office. He leads a component in the city that prefers to engage in the politics of personal destruction to achieve goals. He's taken to Facebook and the streets to criticize and attack and make humiliating comments directed at residents. As I mentioned Monday night, just hosting political signs in my yard of Chenard and Clark before anyone even knew Rowland was running earned me the harassment and profane-laden activity in front of my home for months, which culminated on election night. It hasn't stopped, even as late as July. The same thing occurs outside my home. This is a family community. Councilman Rowland has no right to criticize residents. This person has taken an oath to represent me and all residents. He uses his office and weaponizes public safety, especially toward women. In closing, at the Planning Commission last February, I made a comment and was immediately attacked by Rowland. My husband and I have to deal with this often, as that is a pattern and practice of the councilman. But then to have a complaint made with public safety, accusing me of bullying, seems borderline illegal. This is an abuse of power. It is my legal right to speak here tonight at City Council and all other public comments. But to be constantly attacked and standing strong with all the retaliation from Rowland and the angry mob is deplorable. I can't imagine each one of you in those seats don't feel the same.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Would anyone else who is here today like to speak? All right. Then moving on, our next agenda item, I believe, is the adoption of the opinion. Mr. Mann has not, to this point, shared his thoughts with respect to what I had drafted and circulated. And so I turn to him now and ask him if there are any changes that he would propose.
So first off, let me thank and congratulate you on taking the labor and oar in pulling this together. It's exceedingly helpful. And the conclusions reached in your document, you have my concurrence, but I do have some reactions and would like to discuss whether we might change a thing or two.
Please.
My process, I went through and rewrote the whole thing, and then have since rewriting it, come back and decided to abandon all of my changes with one exception. The one exception is the start of section 2. I think your draft starts section 2. There is no dispute that Raylan received. Is that right?
That is correct.
It seems to me that that paragraph belongs in the prior section. And that section 2 then goes on to speak to the substance of his words. So I would take the paragraph and move it up. And I would start that section with, instead of saying there can be no serious argument, I would strike all of that and simply say, Mr. Rayland's comments that give rise to the 3 complaints were ill-considered, period. Name calling in the face of political disagreement is less than enlightening, period. Nevertheless, this exchange in the heat of hotly contested mayoral and council race does not warrant a finding that the city's ethic ordinance was violated. So I would condense all of that simply to say that. That is the only material change that I would make. I would, if I had authored the first draft, I probably would have, for those of you who are lawyers, announced in dicta that this is clearly behavior that was covered by the First Amendment, protection for free speech. Under no circumstances did the council ever envision that this body would serve as some kind of chancellor with respect to speech, particularly in the context of a political campaign. Can't believe that that would have been the council's intent. But we don't need to say that, but you need to know that one of the board members thinks that. And so with that, I'm done.
And I think the suggestions you have made are very good. If you give them to me, I will incorporate them and we will finalize this.
I'd suggest, if you're willing to adopt, that amendment, that, one of you make a motion to adopt your draft opinion as suggested amendment, and see if that motion passes.
All right.
I move to adopt the draft opinion as revised by my suggested amendment.
All right, and I would agree. I would vote yes.
So you second the motion? And then
I'm
I'll-
sorry. I'm new to this. I second the motion.
Okay, and then as chairman, call a vote.
All right. Mr. Mann, how would you vote? Mr. Basinski would vote yes. And so therefore the motion carries and the opinion as modified by Mr. Mann's comments will become the official opinion of this body. With that, I believe we are completed and I would move to conclude. I believe you have the second. now.
Second.
I vote yes.
Same here.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry.